Heather L. Arnold, a businesswoman by calling, a traveler, and our very, very, very own Lara Croft. I'm now asking my team to get her onto the screen, and my lovely Heather is there. Yeah. So,
Sure.
so we'll go straight to you, Heather. Take it away.
Thank you. So now I am going to get right to it. Um, Thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Heather L. Arnold, and I will be your tour guide today as we travel to the islands of the giants, the lost race of giants of Aruba, Bonaire, and Curacao. I am a researcher and author. I have been researching the giants for over 10 years in the Caribbean, and all of my research is based off of the scientific record. Archaeological reports, field reports, peer-reviewed journal articles, etc. So first, let me explain where the islands are. The islands of Aruba, Bonaire, and Curacao are in the southern Caribbean. They hug the coastline, the northern coastline of South America. They are about 16 miles off the coast of Venezuela. They were once one island, but due to a series of mega tsunamis, they became three separate islands. I originally moved to Aruba and started a tour company, and I wanted to have historically accurate tours. And what I began to do was obviously explore. And what I discovered were a series of coincidences, such as the petroglyphs. So Aruba has an extensive amount of petroglyphs. All three of the islands do. The most preserved archaeological remains are in Aruba. So here you'll see a very common theme in petroglyphs, concentric circles. Concentric circles are found globally. They are found, I've seen them as far away as Easter Island, as close by as upstate New York, where I am right now. That's my daughter. These are in Aruba on private property, which we were invited to see, which is very nice. These were on private property. This is concentric circles here in New Mexico. So this is a common theme, and it really piqued my interest. Same with handprints. These handprints in Aruba are in a cave. They're about 15 feet up on the side of a cave wall. Here's a cave in Bonaire called the Cave of Hands. The entire cave is filled with hundreds of handprints. And again, a common theme found globally. Here we are at Painted Rock National Monument in Arizona. My daughter found these baby prints, a baby handprint and a baby footprint. Another coincidence and a very telling one were the cupules. Now, cupules are cup marks that are put into generally stones that are perpendicular to the earth. Oftentimes they represent the divine female, or the female in terms of wanting to worship the female in a divine form. These cupules are found everywhere on the globe. They are the oldest form of rock art in the world. I think the oldest ones are in Western Australia. I believe they're 60,000 years old. And again, this really intrigued me. Why were these similarities occurring on this small, tiny island? And just to give you an idea of the size of these islands, Aruba is 20 miles long and 6 miles wide. Bonaire is only 24 miles long and 5 miles wide. And Curacao is 40 miles long and 10 miles wide. So these are small islands packed with archaeological treasure. What's going on? Oh, okay, here we go. Here we go. So here is the remains of a gold smelting plant that the Dutch had set up in the early 1800s. And the reason why I show this is because another intriguing part of the story that I was putting together was that the children in the schools on the islands learned that their islands were called the Useless Islands, which was a name that the original explorers gave to the islands. And this is what's being taught. So I thought that's so strange, because there's gold on these islands, and especially in Aruba where there is still gold in the ground. So Aruba particularly would have been very, very important to the early explorers. And so were they calling it the Useless Islands to throw people off of the fact that there was gold? I don't know. Could it have been just a form of colonialism? I'm not sure, but I knew there was something wrong with calling the islands the useless islands. So I began to delve into the true original names of the islands. And I came across Amerigo Vespucci's first letter after his second voyage to the New World. And Vespucci came to the New World, first landing on the coast of the northern coast of South America, we presume, in what is now modern day Venezuela. And he was told by the local population that the island, and they pointed to Aruba because you could see it from the coast of Venezuela, that island had giants and it also had gold. So Vespucci was very invested into getting to that island. This is a great book if you're interested in history and like to geek out to it like I do. This is all of the letters that he wrote back to the King and Queen of Spain of his voyages. And just to give you an idea of what these men were doing, and they were all men, they were experts in their field. Vespucci brought cartographers, linguistic specialists, specialists in flora and fauna, really documentarians who were there to detail all of what they saw, all of what they experienced in detail, what they ate, what people wore. So he took this very seriously. And I've soon found out through reading his work that when he went to Aruba, he stumbled across large footprints in the sand. And he and his crew ended up following these footprints, and they came across 4 women. And these are all Vespucci's words, not mine. The 4 women, 2 were older, 2 were teenage girls. And they beckoned the men to their village, which was quite meager, but expansive. And the women offered the men water and food. They described the food, they described the water very clearly, what it was like, what it tasted like. And then the men, the explorers, began to devise a plan to steal the 2 teenage girls, kidnap them, put them back on their ship to bring them back to Europe. And their plan was foiled when 36 men came and entered the house, and they were of such tall stature that each of them was taller kneeling than I am standing. In some, they were of the stature of giants, the size and proportion of their bodies corresponding to their height. So then Vespucci goes on to explain their weapons, which were enormous. The men became fearful and they started running back to their ship. As they're running back, the giants are right behind them, shooting arrows, keeping quick step. The men get back on the ship and the giants are still coming. Now they're in the water and they're coming after them. They ended up having to shoot off a cannon to scare the giants away. And Vespucci on that day writes that he thought he was going to lose his life. And soon after he said, I name these islands the islands of the giants, due to the enormous stature of the people there. And sure enough, on the first map of the New World ever made by Juan de la Cosa in 1501, 1502, the date is foggy, but the islands of Aruba and Curacao are noted on the map, and they are noted as the islands of the giants. And they retain that name for quite some time. Eventually, the names change. Aruba is supposed to be a version of the original name that was given by the early explorers, which means gold there is. Bonaire and Curacao, it's unsure where those names came from later on, but the original name of the 3 islands were the islands of the giants. Now, here's just a map giving you an idea of the prevalence of giants in North America, Central America, and the Caribbean. And it's extensive. This was a map I contributed to but did not put together. It was put together by Cecilia Hall, an American researcher. And this just gives you an idea of how many giant reports, giant remains, eyewitness reports, newspaper clippings, archaeological records of giants there exist. And this is what we know of. I'm sure we could probably add more because this is probably, I believe, like 2 years old. And also the giants in Aruba had another interesting physical attribute aside from their size. They also had elongated skulls. So here Cecilia has put together, and several researchers, including myself, contributed to this map, a map of all of the elongated skull sites in in North America. So the giants were around from 25,000 BC to 1000 AD, about 5,000 years ago. New dating methods are coming across that maybe they're even 7,000 years old. And that's actually ongoing research at the University of Leiden in the Netherlands. Here's from one of the archaeological reports of the 3 islands and all of the places where the giants were located, where their remains and artifacts have been found, mostly burials in terms of the archaeological evidence. So the creation story of the giants is really quite interesting. The stone you see at the top is called the Mother Stone, and it is in Bonaire. And in the center of the stone is a hole. And from that hole came the giants. It is a navel. They call it the navel of the world. And from this hole is a cord, an umbilical cord that goes to the center of the earth. And the center of the earth is the source, or the mother. And so all the giants were said to be born from this stone. I was lucky enough to see this stone when I went to Aruba, and let me just close one of these things. And yeah, it is there. The hole is there. I don't know if you can see it. They say if you are feeling ill or if you have questions about something, you can go inside this hole, and you would have to go into a fetal position, and all your problems will be solved. You'll also see scattered around the stone a lot of, I didn't take pictures of them, I think you could see if you look closely, but carcasses and skeletal remains of animals. And it is said that these animals go to the stone to die, so that they can get back they're closer to source and can get back quickly upon their death, which is quite interesting. So the anatomical differences of the giants. The giants are, as I said, larger in stature. They have skull elongation. Their skull is positioned differently on the neck to accommodate the weight of the brain case, because the giants in Aruba, their skulls go up and back. That's their form of elongation. Their jaws are of superior size and strength and positioned differently on the skull. They have shovel-shaped teeth. They have thicker bones, and they are well proportioned. If you want to look for giants, you can find them in a lot of ways. You have to look for caves. Giants love caves. They also love water, and they love megaliths. And in the case of Aruba, the megaliths were all made of limestone and diorite. Just to give you a quick idea of what we're talking about with megaliths, these are the balanced stone sites. I'm mapping all of them. So far, we're up to 10 balanced stone sites on the island of Aruba, and a pattern is forming, which is really exciting. The pattern that is forming is that these balanced stones are going northwest to southeast. All the petroglyphs on the island also go northwest to southeast in parallel diagonal lines. So the balanced stones, which you'll see some here, are also going that way. If you can see, here's my daughter by one. These are massive, massive, massive stones. These are not eroded from the stone, as many have said, because in some cases the stone on top is different than the stone that it's being balanced on. And these, just to give you an idea, and these are just some of them. A new one was just found actually last week. So also giants love caves. And here in Bonaire, for example, it's the largest cave system in the Caribbean. There are over 400 caves. Here in Aruba, this site is one of the more sacred sites. It's about 250 feet up off the floor. You have to climb up to get to these caves, very inaccessible. The cave on the right was a birthing chamber. The cave in the center was obviously some sort of ritual, place of ritual. It's filled with petroglyphs that look as if they were done yesterday, which is so amazing. And the last cave is the cave of the burials. And in this cave of the burials were giants. The giant burials demonstrate elite status. The skeletons are in the ground, or the bodies are cremated. They have complex grave markers, and the burials form geometric patterns, in particular isosceles triangles, or a central burial with other burials coming out, radiating out as if spokes in a wheel. And the elongated portion of the skulls are painted in an ochre color, which is from locally sourced manganese. and there are extensive amount of grave gifts. So clearly the giants were in charge. It was also a matriarchal society. Here is from the archaeological record of how the giants were. This is spokes in the wheel burial, and that was in the cave that I just showed you. The giant is in the middle, and there were 2 other giants, and then average statured people who had also a skull deformation, but it was a bulbous skull deformation. Archaeologists have concluded the skull deformation is natural. So it was not artificial. So there are 5 skeletons buried at Kaneshito, 3 with very large elongated skulls, and 2 were of average stature with a bulbous skull. Now we get to the bones. So here is from the archaeological record. You can see these were enormous skulls. The largest skull found from this site was over a foot long, 290 millimeters. And you can really tell the skull elongation when you compare it to a modern human skull. And here's what they look. This is from the archaeological report while they were in the ground. Some of the bones could not be extracted because they just disintegrated upon extraction. This is the cover of one of the archaeological reports, and I post this because it is the color of ochre that was painted on the elongated portion of the skulls. So the investigators made the cover that color, and this is what one of the burials looked like. And here, actually, that is the burial. So they had these stones that they took from a different quarry, depending on how prominent the person was. It was something simple like that, or more ornate. This was a stone circle with shells and bones in the middle. And as I said, the burials were in the form of isosceles triangles, where the giants were at the angles and the average statured people were along the other parts of the triangle. And here's the archaeologist sketch of what those burials look like. And here they are. Generally, they were in the fetal position, but sometimes they were supine. This is called the Malmuk Cemetery. This is the largest cemetery thus far. This was a woman. She was the central burial in this amongst probably over 100 burials. She had the most prominent burial, most complex burial, and she was also the oldest. And it's believed she was actually the head of the entire tribe of giants. So here I mentioned the jaw. Here's a jaw from the archaeological report. The teeth are very worn. This jaw is compared to a modern adult jaw, so you can see right away the difference in size and anatomy. And then we get to 2 skulls that I'm still looking for, if anyone knows where they are. They were mentioned in this book by a researcher named Chris Angles, The Quest for the Giants. And he excavated on his own 2 skulls that he was able to get from the ground. The bodies sadly disintegrated upon extraction. This skull has its hand fused to its face. The skull was analyzed by the researcher, actually the head investigator of the Tropical Museum in Amsterdam. And she determined before her untimely death, which was very odd, that this was the largest hand she had ever studied, that the skull had elongation, and that these 2 skulls clearly belonged to a race of humans still unknown and clearly of giant stature. And those were her conclusions. And these 2 skulls were on display for quite some time in a museum in Curacao. And this is from the Reading Eagle, a Pennsylvania, USA newspaper, and from 1980. And the reporter goes down to the Curacao Museum, and she writes about the skulls that she sees. She says, it includes a display of skulls of Los Gigantes, a tribe of Indians who inhabited the island in ancient times and were believed to be over 7 feet tall. So those 2 skulls now are missing. I'm in contact with archaeologists on all 3 islands, curators of the museums on all 3 islands. I'm also called the University of Leiden. No one knows where these 2 skulls are. So the museum went under a renovation and they completely disappeared, which is par for the course with giant remains, sadly. So the findings in the cemetery were the 70 burials that they excavated in total. There were probably over 100. 10 out of the 36 skulls that they were able to extract from the ground were elongated, including the skull of a 10-year-old child. And the same 10 skeletons were of larger stature. One skeleton out of the 36 was a dwarf. Oftentimes when you hear about giants and giant burials, there's always little people around the giants too, which is quite intriguing. And 50% of the burials had red ochre painted on their skulls. And finally, we come to the most complete giant skeleton ever discovered. It is called the Bonaire skeleton. Here it is in the ground. It was discovered in 1980 in Bonaire. It is the largest, most complete skeleton ever found. And I was so blessed to be able to see it 2 years ago. And here it is. It's in the back of a museum, crumpled into a case, so disrespectful. But nonetheless, I got to take pictures of him. They say it's a man. And he was proposed, the archaeologist, after researching the skeleton, determined that this skeleton was over 8 feet tall. He's about 1,000 years old, they believe, but he could be much older. Here's the skull shape. So you'll see the largest skull found in the burials on Aruba, and then his skull is the gray. So he's much bigger even than the ones that were found in Aruba. And the conclusion of the investigators after analyzing the Bonaire skeleton is that the Bonaire skeleton belonged to an Indian who clearly exceeded the stature expected. The more than average stature of Indians inhabiting the Lesser Antilles mentioned, according to Angles and Vespucci, was very much disputed. Vespucci's statement is more or less corroborated by this skeleton. So meaning that the researchers could finally conclude with confidence that there were giants on the island and that they were of above stature of any of the modern humans or anyone that they had seen in the past. So the question I always get is, where did they go? So that's a great question. In 2003, mitochondrial DNA analysis was done of the Aruban population because the Aruban population was basically kept cloistered, so there wasn't a lot of mixture of different DNA. And what they determined was that 70% of modern Arubans' mitochondrial DNA originates from the archaic people of Aruba, who are the giants. So in other words, at some point, the giants probably ran out of other giants, so they began to mate with average statured people. So 70% of Arubans today are walking around with giant DNA. And some still have the characteristics, tall foreheads. I talk to people on the island. My book will feature all these conversations I have with locals about people in their family who were giants. It's very interesting. My work has been entered into the National Archives in Aruba. I've been mentioned in their local newspapers several times. I'll be filming a television show in Aruba in June on my research. And if anyone's interested in following me socially, I am Heather L. Arnold. My page on Facebook is The Islands of the Giants, and I'm posting there all the time. I'm very active on social media, and I want to thank you so much for your time, and I'm so excited to answer your questions.
Young Heather, my God, a masterclass in the new anthropology. Thank you. Oh my God, if you're not in this project for 3 years, young lady, you've got trouble. I'm telling you now. Absolutely wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. I mean, you know, it develops the theme we're looking at overall. What is the new anthropology? What can it say about human origins and human diversity? I suspect our species has been much more diverse than it is now. What an amazing comment. Heather, my dear, we're passing over to questions. I see my friend Stead has a question for you. Stead, the floor is yours.
Thanks. Thanks so much, Heather. Is there any indication of the language that these people might have spoken? I mean, you did mention in the quote from Amerigo Vespucci, that they kind of spoke to these ladies. So presumably, I don't know, they must have had an interpreter or something, or how did they do that?
Though they didn't. That's why they began, actually, that's why these 36 men nearly killed them, because Vespucci was a little bit paranoid, if you've read anything about him, and he started to freak out. He didn't understand what the women were saying. The women didn't understand him either. And so that miscommunication really caused a lot of stress and panic. And then these men came, and there needed to be no communication, because once the explorers saw the weaponry, they dashed. But there are original names of these places in Aruba, Bonaire, and Curacao. It's unclear how archaic the names are, but they don't compare to any of Arawak language or any other modern or even ancient languages around. So, for example, one cave is called Quadiri Kiri. Very interesting names, and of course they've been written into English. They had no written language as far as we know, but they did have extensive petroglyph panels. In Aruba, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of petroglyphs, and they're all still in existence for the most part, although some have sadly been vandalized. But great question.
I have to cut you off there, Stead, because we've got to speed. My apologies. Remember, everyone, we will be having a second breakout session. We're moving now to Dave Bryan, who wishes, please keep it brief, Dave. What is your question to Heather?
I just wondered, Heather, first of all, thank you for what you shared. Have you run into L.A. Marzulli working down there, who wrote On the Trail of the Nephilim? And I also wondered if there was any evidence of multi-rows of teeth or 6 fingers or 6 toes in the skeletons that you've examined.
That's a great question, Will. I know of LA. I have not personally met him. As far as I know, I'm the only human on Earth doing research about the giants of the Caribbean. And for that, quite frankly, at the moment, I'm grateful, because it's extensive and it's hard to piece together, but I welcome the help. No, there's no evidence, at least in the Aruban, Bonaire, Curacao giants, that they had 6 fingers, 6 toes, or double rows of teeth. Now, I just was in New Mexico about a week ago, and yet you see 6-finger handprints, 6-finger toe prints, all petroglyphs all over the place. Chaco Canyon, same thing. But these giants, no, they did not have that anomaly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. I really appreciated what you shared.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dave. I mean, please hang out, stay around for the chat rooms, for the breakouts. I'm sure a much more enriching conversation can take place apart from the rubrics of time we have now. I mean, certainly I was sent during, I think it was the week before last, photographs of living people in Latin America, deep, deep, deep down towards the frozen regions, that had 6 fingers and were alive and healthy today. We're now going to Rue again. Please keep it brief, Rue. What is your question to Heather?
Thank you. Hi, Miss Heather. I love seeing you. I'm up in here in New York with you, so I'm looking for things too. My question was, in your research of the islands, did you find that the giants you found were any connection to the Omelex of the Easter Islands?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm very in close contact with the head of archaeology in Aruba. We're very close. We're friends. He shares a lot of knowledge with me on the down low, because he's a scientist, so he doesn't want to ruin his credibility, which I find laughable. But he has told me he believes that these giants might have been from Egypt. So I don't know if that's true. I wouldn't even know where to begin. I guess we'd have to do a lot more genetic analysis. But there certainly could be a correlation between all the global giants that are found. And that's what I believe. You know, I've been to Easter Island. Of course, they have giants. They found giant remains there. They're ancient. The Moai are supposed to be giants. So there could definitely be a connection. I mean, it's really if you're in a boat, it's not that difficult to get from Easter Island. Well, it would be, but it's possible to get to Easter Island to the Caribbean. So, and I'm not quite sure about the Olmec connection, but that could be too. There just needs to be more advances in science and DNA research to really prove that, because I would love to know too.
Thank you, Rue. Remember, please hang out for the breakout sessions. We can have longer conversations then. My dear friend, Brian J. Cano of America's Most Haunted needs to unmute himself now and ask very, very quickly, Brian, thank you, a question to our wonderful Heather.
Hi, this might seem like a pedestrian question, so I apologize in advance, but given the origin of these things, there's no question as far as you're finding the evidence of it. Do you feel that they are of indigenous Earth origin? It's an archaeological holdover of something that was naturally occurring, or could this be evidence of perhaps an alien divergence?
That's a great question. Thank you, Brian. Also, the same archaeologist believes that the giants were of intelligent design. He thinks there was some sort of intervention. And this is a scientist telling me that, these aren't my words. So he feels that there could have been some sort of extraterrestrial interjection in the genetics, and that created these giants. Something not of this earth, let's put it that way. And then they began to travel. Some people think they're from Atlantis or Mu or Lemuria. So there could be some sort of intervention of an intelligent life force to create the giants. I don't rule anything out. Not until we have the proof will I rule things out. So that's a great question.
You see, we're at the beginning of our researches. Sorry for rushing you, Brian. Wonderful to have you on board. Remember, there is a breakout session very, very soon. Heather, darling, take care. Don't run away. You've got some admirers to talk to, but we do have to move on to our next panelist.
Okay, thank you.